Today I'll be talking about the subtle and the crude forms of energy and how there's two paths, either the mastery path or the indulgence path, as a way of being in luxury. So subtle is, here I'm going to be talking about as doing the emotional work, which is using the energy of emotions, which are crude. And for example, the child, the tantrum envelops the entire being and lay on the floor and scream and kick, and it's bigger than you. Versus as an adult, there could be a moment of mastery where the face doesn't even change as we feel these feelings. So increasing power can look like staying composed. I am more powerful than this big field of energy running through me, and I'm not going to react to this energy. I'm just going to pause. Or it can look like a colloid, which is kind of like the energy's in me swimming and I'm compressing it, and I'm almost reacting to the experience of having the energy. So it's not quite refining. The experience of refining it is saying, wow, this person, it's really a lot of work. I have to constantly control my temper around them. Versus, I'm going to deny I have a temper because I cannot be someone who has tantrums. Those are very different ways. So the subtle being refined is what I'm talking about here with mastery. And versus the colloid. The colloid is just two existing components together. One is kind of, there's like a liquid, and then there's pieces of it, kind of like chunks or pearls almost, like held in place in this like plasma. So it's not really like it's getting broken down and absorbed. And there's the idea of a chimera. I hope I'm saying it correctly, which is, in humans, a chimera is like when you have two sets of DNA and it doesn't get refined. It's like a colloid. There's one set and another set, and they're both in there. And this happens kind of like they believe when two twins are in the womb, one dies very early on, embryonic stage, and the one that dies is absorbed, that DNA set is absorbed by the other, but it doesn't get in that process, integrated, applied, and then kind of like broken down to be completely unified with the original DNA set. So this comes from the idea, by the way, chimera. Actually, there's the mythology aspect, which is this monster almost, or beast, or creature that has one part lion, of the lion's head, a snake's tail, a dragon tail, serpentine tail, and a goat body. And so this idea of like, it's a good image to say like the two sets are not being enmeshed. They're not becoming unified. When you refine something, you do not have two mixed together. You have one, and it's become refined by the process. So you don't have bubbles of heat inside of the metal. You actually have a purified metal by the process of heating it. So So there's process, and then to integrating it means that some parts become removed, and then applying it is like, oh, it's a unified whole that can be used as a unified whole. So bringing this into emotions, we're obviously healing the family system, and we're not blaming women anymore. So brute force or submitting are the two ways. Like we might say, I'm going to force you to do it, versus like the submission of, you're the bigger one, so I'm going to trust that you could take care of this. So we're going to stop blaming women, and we're going to heal the family system by healing our emotions. How is that possible? So for the bigger rightness of having a discipline is one good reason. Just the fact that when you're disciplined, you are able to learn the information, and the emotion carries. So in the situation, I feel disappointed. I learn about my expectation of a previous concept that used to carry me. Being able to submit in the moment is to let others be right. So let me broaden that. A woman is able to submit. She's able to say, sure, you're right, sweetie, or honey, or baby, and letting it be that you're so right and it's okay. However, by brute force wanting to be right, is the manliness, is like, I'm not strong enough, my opinion, the truth doesn't stand. I have to force you to agree with me, believe me, or at least on the outside you have to be totally subdued if you're going to have a different opinion. So why might a man want to do this? For the sake of having a discipline. Well, automatic benefits for beginners on working on patience is that it actually feels good. The body feels safe. There's nothing to force. Everybody is okay. It's actually a peaceful feeling. So the body rewards you for practicing discipline with peace. Children, pets, they all love routine, order. And when we're out of control, we have a piece of us that becomes self-judging, self-shaming, and it, as I said, a colloid, that shame and that judgment have nowhere to go because we're not integrating the message that we don't always know everything and we can't always be the perfect one and always be the right one. So those feelings get trapped. And if we do practice patience and feel the feelings, right away we actually get rewarded with like really good feelings. And anybody can say this. Practice it. Practice being patient and see how good you feel after. Whether it's, I won't stop this set of exercises, I'm going to keep going. Or if it's like, I'm not going to answer back to this person. There's an empowered feeling. This is the real power. This is the increase of power. And it feels good to feel powerful. That you're not my ruler, that I could get so angry when you say a little thing I don't like. You're not my ruler, that, you know, you're going to try to provoke me because you're in a bad mood and I'm going to react. So the relationship is how we accept them, even if they're unpleasant or can't be bent to our will or conform. And that's really the relationship with life. Life often cannot be bent to our will or conform. We're pushing and it just is further away. Or we're pushing and it changes. And it's like, wait, I didn't even want this, but now I'm in so deep, you know? So kind of like the tendency to discard the unpleasant immediately versus learning to receive information and benefits of the energy to let it go is like, you're being tough enough to not look tough. Means that you don't have to be aggressive or loud or physical, because your power can be a more subtle power. It can exude off of you, radiate off of you. And people listen to that one who doesn't raise his voice all the time or doesn't have to be so pushy all the time, you know? It's that lion head almost, is like the idea that I'll survey the situation and I'll see in a measured way when I want to use my energy, because that's the energy work. The energy work is subtle mastery, subtle power. It's so hard to keep grieving losses and broken truths is the reason, I believe, why it makes sense that there's denial and anger, because it's so hard. We avoid and reject these emotions that are painful. I wanted this. I really wanted this and it's taken, or it didn't work out, or they don't want me, or it isn't, what I thought. And instead of feeling that grief now, it's so bad. Instead of going there and then feeling how bad it feels for whatever reason, feeling the information, awakening the compassion that we're each going through that, and maybe the people we're getting so upset with are actually more like us and could relate to us and make us feel more connected rather than separate. And also the broken trust, like feeling misunderstood for me is a big one with my father. And it's like every time he accuses me of something, it's like he's misunderstanding me again. But then I realize in a deeper way, as I feel those horrible feelings, that he feels misunderstood. And he feels like, the trust is broken again. So it really does bring us to this place of men, cultures, broken home, that safety and trust in the home. That the home is safe and that we can trust you to, not be aggressive, not be loud, to be subtle here. For this to be a resting pot for things to release and for the light energy to be here. And, children need that with the mother. Children need that with the father. Children need that in the home. And there is an issue when there's hypocrisy, because when there's violence in the home, and I mean even violating, interrupting, talking over, invalidating, nullifying, all this kind of stuff, violating the spirit or the psyche of the other, having them pick up the pieces of their self all the time, is that we respect these guides and role models in the home, and yet they're telling us not to react to our emotions, not to be misbehaving, not to do anything they don't like, and yet they're doing it. They're out of control. So it's like practicing emotionally bonding with somebody who doesn't care about emotionally bonding, because they're not even bonded to their own emotions. And it's very painful to care for others in this way. So many of us become loners, isolated. We choose drugs and alcohol, sex, technology to kind of like, when we're feeling these emotions, to bond and be okay, because there isn't a co-regulation, a mirror. And, there's a sense of hypocrisy. There's not the sense of integrity and trust. And that's why I say, like, to integrate is to have integrity, is to say, like, these practices I say, subtle mastery, patience, kindness, I will be practicing this too, even when it's difficult. And letting that sink in. That, ultimately it's a practice of caring from a place of abundance. Because I'm not going to be depleted or despair when someone stops caring. They have to move on with their life. I'm not going to feel like I'm tied up in that. That's not all of me. That's a part of me. I have to pick up the pieces of me all the time. People just take a piece of you and then throw it on the ground. And that feeling is the practice. The subtle mastery is every time we feel that. What is that? It's rejection, right? So it's like rejection, misunderstood, as I said, violated, being like, the way we immediately discard anything unpleasant is what was done to us. So if the emotion feels unpleasant and we immediately discard it, it's like that's how we were treated. When we were slightly unpleasant to the other, we were not pleasing them, they discarded us. And we pick up the pieces of ourselves again. I am valuable, I am worth it, I am enough, even if they don't see it. And then we realize they must be suffering in the same way. They're losing the information, they're losing their subtle mastery. And it's not important to take their inventory kind of and worry about why and all this and, that was done to them, that's why they do it. It is more important to become a subtle master. So being able to trust compassion matters, especially when it's hard emotions, because when it's effective, for example, witnessing selfishness or entitlement and in myself or others, it's like we recognize the person right that moment is dealing with difficult emotions. On the process, wanting soothing. They don't want to feel anything unpleasant. They don't want to feel the unpleasantness. It's too hard. So, they want to change it. And it's really hard to stay open and to understand, understanding changes everything. It heals us, each one, one by one. And so we stay open. We say, this person cannot be there for me. My expectation of being made a priority is not happening. So this is like the mastery aspect, and it's a luxury. It's a luxury to not take things personally. It's a luxury to not be in survival mode so much that we don't need others to understand us because we had enough time to understand ourselves. It's a luxury to be in a safe enough environment to practice feeling safe in our emotions. It's a luxury to have the skills to process these emotions without just burying them so they stay in that colloid, but rather integrating them and purifying like the parts that we might call dark. And why am I so passionate about this as a comment is because we're all separated by 7 degrees of separation. So if I am compassionate with 7 people and I have unconditional love for 7 people, and I say I need this, they need this, we all need this, it's enough for it to potentially reach 49 people. Maybe there's overlap. Maybe I do it with family members who do it with each other. But it could reach, if I do 7 different people, they could each have 7 people. It could reach possibly 49 people. And each person can reach 49 people. And this changes the world. And that's why I'm taking this time. And I don't advertise my videos. I just put them on YouTube. I don't even believe that any of them have views. I don't really check. And one day, maybe people will be watching this. And it's worth it. It's worth it to become a subtle master. It's a luxury. And, it is. To be refined is a luxury. And now I'm going to talk about the indulgence aspect, just briefly, because this is all much more important. And most of us can understand wanting to indulge and feel good because life can be really hard and emotions can really hurt, and either we escape the emotions or we try to reward ourselves for feeling them, or they feel like a punishment, so we want a distraction. So I'm just going to say my own personal background now, like why about indulgence. Why did we all understand wanting to indulge, and I'm going to talk about my background just because I believe that there's a few little nuggets in there that could be relatable. So first of all, my father was raised religious in repression. Everything was off limits except food. He became a food addict. He is very overweight, suffered from heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and more. And he couldn't indulge in anything. Sex was off limits. He drank here or there, but it really wasn't, you couldn't really get drunk all the time. And almost everything else was off limits. And my mother was so poor that they couldn't afford much beyond basic needs. I mean, I remember her telling me her new shoes were too small. The cookies were always a day old and broken. And they moved around so much because they kept getting evicted. So she didn't get to really settle and have many of those luxuries that many of us take for granted, including me. So looking at my father, who's, very obsessively trying to follow the rules, and my mother who's just too poor to have anything outside of the rules, I can see why I inherited a sense of getting attached to certain indulgences. And when my mother was working to buy stuff for the family right when I was born and not giving me breast milk made for me during the day because she was, pumping and stuff, but it wasn't fresh by the time she got to me, my father would feed me from a bottle because she said she stopped producing even abundantly for me, and I stopped nursing after 3 months. It was easier for me with the bottle, she said. So I was deprived of certain sustenance and nutrients, and so sometimes this is everything is the lead up to the moment where suddenly you could say, I have enough. I do have the nutrients. I do have the sustenance. And I do have indulgence. I mean, I won't know what it's like to not have food in my lifetime because of the country I live in. Even when I'm very poor, I can ask a friend for money. I can go to a food pantry. I can go to even a school probably, or an old age home, and they're feeding people. And I say, I have no money or food. Could you give me a meal? And they would. Or I could go to community, groups and see what I could get. So it's like, even if we're totally without our own money, there's still just an abundance of food. And people do shoplift. People do, panhandle outside of restaurants and things. And restaurants do put out food and people take after the end of the day. So there's many, many ways in which we will not be able to relate to there not being enough. Some people, it was like drinking once a week was such a pleasure, such a gift. And now it's like people who drink every day. There was a time I remember where it was very hard to get I'm 31, maybe it's different for everyone, but it was a little harder to get psilocybin mushrooms, Adderall, all these kind of drugs, basically, plant medicine or drugs. And nowadays I'm walking in the park and someone's offering it to me. There's an abundance idea here. So why are we still attached to indulgence? And that's why I bring up